Hi everyone, it's Lauren and today I'm going to be talking through all of the books that I read last month in November. As always, if you find any of these books particularly interesting, there will be links to each of them in the description box below. I read such a range of books this month. It's quite eclectic and there's quite a variance in my opinions of these books as well. There was a couple that I loved and then some which I did not love so much. So I don't know whether to start with the bad news. I think I might, because I think that was the first book I read this month, and that was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Now, this is bad news that I didn't like it, but you know, it's also bad news because I was really looking forward to reading this book and I had heard so many good things about it. This is set in a kind of I want to say post-apocalyptic, but it's not really, it's kind of post-Exodus from Earth galaxy, where I guess the Earth has died and all the humans are living either on Mars or in various ports around the galaxy. There's lots of different aliens. It kind of reminded me of that Star Trek-y type situation where there's like an alliance of different species all together across the galaxy. In this book we're following this one woman called Rosemary who's coming from Mars onto this spaceship, the Wayfarer, and the Wayfarer's job is to punch holes in space. What I've heard from other sources is that if you do read a lot of sci-fi, then this book series is quite different to a lot of other stuff that's out there in that genre, in that this is about a journey of this ship going from one place to this new planet, and then they're going to punch a wormhole back to where they came from. That's kind of the whole plot really, but it's quite episodic and it does feel like a TV series in a way where you're really focusing on the characters and on the people in the spaceship, and each chapter or so something will happen, but the characters are the through line. Unfortunately for me, although I enjoyed the reading process, actually I didn't think it was unenjoyable to read. I just found the writing extremely poor and the characters really weak, really unthought through. I felt like it was very, very obvious that all of these ragtag different people all living on a spaceship, different species, I thought it was very obvious that they were all created by the same mind. I thought it was very clear that their interactions were supposed to be hilarious and different, and I thought it was really trying too hard. I didn't kind of lose myself in any of the characters. I thought they were very superficial. I just, you know, considering that's supposed to be the strong point of this book, and there was so much exposition as well, not just in terms of the plot, but in terms of people's characters, and it was so unnecessary and unneeded. I mean, if it had been written well enough, you wouldn't need to explain your character's motivations all the time. So I was just really disappointed. Maybe it was overhyped. You know, maybe as someone who doesn't read a lot of sci-fi, this was not what I thought it was going to be. I would love to hear from you if you have read this book. I'd like to hear all of your opinions, whether they're good or bad. First bad review out of the way now, so that's good. The next book I have to talk to you about, I adored, basically. So that's some good news, and that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Now, I read this because this was the November-December book club pick for the Feminist Orchestra, and the details of which I will leave in the description box below. I will do a much fuller review video with Jean about this book, so I don't want to go into too much detail about it now, but it was absolutely fantastic. I guess you wouldn't really call this sci-fi, it's more like a paranormal kind of book, I suppose. It's following a woman called Dana who's living in the United States in the 70s, and periodically she is pulled back in time against her will to Maryland kind of during the slave period, which is obviously not a safe place for a black woman to be at that time. But then she discovers that one of the slave owners, one of the ranch owners, is actually one of her ancestors. So she has a vested interest in keeping this boy alive. And it's almost worse in a way. It almost really brings it home to you because she's not of that society and she hasn't grown up in it. So she's almost more vulnerable than the other people. I mean, all of the black people, obviously, at this time are very, very vulnerable to violence. But you almost feel even more for Dana because she shouldn't be there and she doesn't really know how to navigate herself. And I just couldn't put it down. I was so invested in her safety and her getting out of there alive, which just made it feel really, really real and really frightening in parts, but also just so fascinating as well at the same time, and amazing writing. I would 100% recommend it. And as I said, I'll go into much more detail when I discuss this with Jean with the official kind of book club video video later in the month, I think. The next book I picked up was A Room with a View by Ian Forster, and I picked this up because I've read a little bit of Forster before. I've read Howard's End. I thought it was okay and wasn't blown away by it, but I wanted to give his writing another try. I've got to say, after reading this, I have come to the same conclusion that it's fine. This was written in 1908, and we're following a group of English people at that time. When we meet them, they're all on holiday in Florence, and what's happened is they're on it. They call it a pension, and it sounds to me a little bit like a package holiday, like they've signed up to go on this pension, and therefore they're going around Italy all together. And it's about what happened when people of different classes all mingle in a situation like in Italy, where, you know, the normal social rules that you'd have in the UK are not present anymore. Parts of it I found very funny, some of the characters I found really engaging, and it was quite interesting, but at other parts I did feel like Ian Forster just kind of almost starts in the middle of a sentence or in the middle of something that's happening, and sometimes I'd have to kind of flick back through the pages and be like, what just happened? I don't think I really understood that. Or a lot of things were implied without being really fully explored. So I felt like I couldn't get really into the book, or sometimes I lost little bits and aspects of the plot. A complete change of genre and mood again with my next read, which was Dreamer's Pool by Juliette Marillier, and I read this together with Jean and Jill, and we had a little bit of a read along, which was really fun. This is, I was going to say hardcore fantasy, high fantasy. I suppose it's not. Again, I don't read very much sci-fi. I don't read very much fantasy either, so I wouldn't really know how to specify this book within that genre. But it's set in a kind of fantastical medieval Ireland, like Ireland the country type environment. What I really enjoyed about this story is it's kind of half fantasy epic and it's half mystery, and it's also like very feminist and very modern in the kind of issues that it's dealing with as well. So it was really interesting, it was really fun to read, but you also felt like you were unravelling things that were going on as well. Firstly, you have the two main characters, Blackthorn, who is an old wise woman or healer, or she was many years ago, and Grim, who are two people who were locked in a prison by this chieftain for spurious reasons and have been released. But it is on the proviso that Blackthorn is kind of indebted to the Fae, or like the other good people, the magical people of this realm, and she has to not seek revenge for 7 years, I think, or yeah, it might be 7, it might be 6, it might be 5, I don't know, a period of time. She has to not seek revenge, and she has to help everybody who asks her for it. So you're kind of, I feel like the long plot of this series is going to be following Blackthorn. In this book, she's dealing with a situation between a prince and his new bride, and something's a little bit odd with his bride when she arrives in this new kingdom, and they're going to try and work out what's been going on with her. So yeah, it's really fun. A lot of the themes in this book are about power over women, and a lot of the things that go wrong are with women being assaulted, or how they are going to deal with unplanned pregnancies. And it's very modern, the way it's looking at victim blaming in sexual assault cases. And I mean, I know I'm saying it's modern as if this is historical fiction, which it is obviously not, it's fantasy, but it's really nice to see those kind of perspectives being tackled in a book which is kind of set in that very medieval, old-fashioned landscape. It was just really good fun, and I can't wait to pick up the next book in the series. I'm going to quickly talk about a poetry collection which I only read half of because I just could not get into it, unfortunately, and that is Who is Mary Sue by Sophie Collins. Now, the title poem in this collection I actually really liked, because the concept of a Mary Sue is when an author kind of writes an idealised version of themselves. And this poem is really interesting, looking into the kind of catch-22 that women writers are within, where if they write a very different, interesting character, the critics would say, oh, you're just idealising yourself, what you would like to be. And if they write a very gritty, dark character, then they must be being very true, but again, about themselves, and how they're not kind of given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to being very inventive and very clever. And there's sections in the poem of blank space where it's kind of implied that women writers are being silenced by the way that their work is being criticised, so they're too scared that their characters are going to be described as Mary Sues, so they don't write at all. That poem I absolutely loved. Every other poem in this collection made completely no sense to me at all. There's some really nice parts, and I know you're not supposed to really understand every single poem all the time. I understand that. And some of the language was very good, but I felt like I couldn't even get a thread of what any poem was about. Sort of one stanza would be talking about, oh, when I was little, my mother said this to me and my sister, and then the next stanza would be talking about like Imperial Russia, and the next stanza would be talking about a duck, and you're just like reading these poems like, what? So I wasn't getting anything from it, so I stopped reading it. But the Who is Mary Sue poem, really good and really different to kind of everything else in this collection, so that was a bit of a shame. And finally, a book which I very, very much enjoyed, and I've actually talked about a little bit in my previous video, which is a reading blog of the weekend when I was reading this book, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. Now this is an autobiography, and Tara Westover grew up in a very conservative Mormon household in Idaho, and her parents, but her father more specifically, as she grew up, got more and more wary of the state, and they took their children out of school, and they said you can't go to doctors because they didn't trust doctors, and it kind of got worse and worse, it sounds like to me, as she grew up, in terms of their fear of, I guess, the government and wanting to be able to heal themselves, essentially. I think that was kind of part of their faith as well, that they felt like if you are ill, God will heal you. So she grew up in this situation and managed eventually to get out of it and not only go to school, like she went to Cambridge and Harvard, I think, as well at the end, and she's a PhD student now. And it also just made me so angry because there's so much abuse happening within her family, both intentional and not really as well, because some of it is emotional manipulation, some of it is very physical abuse, some of it is just her father just not caring. It felt like to me when his children got hurt and not sending them to the doctor when they had very serious injuries and just letting them heal. So it was fascinating to learn about her family and her mother and father's beliefs, and also really interesting to see how she got herself out of that situation, what her relationship with her family is like now. And I got so into it, I read it all over the course of a weekend because I couldn't put it down. So that's me for November. I actually really enjoyed this month because I read quite a lot more than I have in ages, actually. Like, I didn't read very much over the summer at all, so I really enjoyed reading such vastly different types of books this month. It's been really fun, and I've also really got through the TBR that I set for myself in October, so I'm feeling kind of smug about that as well. As always, I'd love to have another chat with you in the comments if you have read any of these books or if you're interested in reading any of them, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!